Hey, you guys, we are back again, of course, with Gray Roots. Good to have everyone back again. And hello, girls.
Good
Hello, hello. I
morning.
got Kathy and Alicia here, of course, of course.
Whoop,
One
whoop.
of the things that I love about this time here is that, just a side note, is our friendship. We didn't talk for years, and this
Mm,
podcast has almost been a scheduled conversation between the three of us. We
yeah,
know we're going to talk and we're going to see each other. So if you're out there and you have friends that you have not talked to, start a podcast. Doesn't matter if anybody listens.
decision.
You just get to have conversations with your friends. So this has been great. Otherwise, I don't think we would talk. So today we are actually going to be talking about something that I think has come up and could have come up in every other topic that we've talked about. And for some of us, me included, this was me before I learned about it. This can be almost like a bad word or instill some negative emotions. So we're going to be talking about boundaries, and depending on your situation and your circumstances, this can mean different things. So first, I'm going to read some quotes from Dr. Henry Cloud, the book Boundaries. We all read that?
Cloud and
Hmm.
Townsend.
Yeah, Cloud and
Yeah.
Townsend. So there's a few here. What are boundaries? Boundaries are basically about providing structure, and structure is essential in anything that thrives. So
Oh,
relationships have to have structure. In order to have structure, we have to have boundaries. And then the next one is a good test of a relationship is how a person responds to the word no. Love respects no, control does not. So for me, the first experience really was a kid watching my mom have boundaries. She had some she didn't have, but just watching her, she was a full time. She worked full time and then she came home and took care of us and did the food and did all the things. And I watched her in the evening set boundaries on herself and to take care of herself. She, as much as a kid, I want her to play a game with me for 4 hours. She said, you know what, this is great. I had fun and I need to go to bed now. And she set a boundary on that. And then she always made time, it feels like, watching her to get a little workout in. Even in the evening when we're all sitting around the TV, she was doing some kind of exercise right in front of the TV. So I feel like she had really good boundaries on herself as far as that. So that was my first exposure to healthy boundaries in that way. There, like I said, there were some other things that were going on that were not boundaries. But can you guys think about, what was your grown up experience, and were there boundaries and were there not in certain areas?
I feel like I think about parenting boundaries as a kid. I definitely had boundaries. And what I remember most about those boundaries were the consequences that were attached to the boundaries. I don't know if that's what you're looking for here. If you're talking about like my dad didn't have a whole lot of boundaries. It was kind of a free for all when I go visit him, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. A lot of manipulation to try to control things, but not a whole lot of like what I would call healthy boundaries. Whereas my mom, you have to be in the house at a certain time or you have a certain bedtime. You can't have dessert until you finish your vegetables or whatever is the good, the bad, or whatever. But there were boundaries and then there were consequences tied to those boundaries so that she was trying to teach me like, hey, this is where here are your left and right limits, girl. Like, live with.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, I felt like that was teenager. I felt like I was like being squished. As I got older, like I realized, okay, that came from a place of love.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's how does love respond to no, and it's sometimes it's hard to say no to your kids.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what about from your perspective? I guess you're going to the parent, you being the child, and then the boundaries that the parents put on you. For me, I was the youngest of four. And by the time I came around, it's like, whatever, girl, like just do whatever. I needed boundaries. I needed to have those boundaries and didn't have them in order to thrive, which, like you were saying, as a teenager, sometimes it seems like it's restricting and you're keeping me from doing all these things when really it's to thrive within that fence of having boundaries. What about you, Kathy? Anything come to mind growing up?
Yeah, similar. I mean, my parents had definitely some strict be home at 11, not a minute later, and I respected that. So in some areas there weren't boundaries. Like I could talk on the phone. I remember getting a Mickey Mouse phone for Christmas one year and my own phone number, which I thought was the most amazing gift
Wow.
ever. And I would talk on that phone till 3 in the morning. So there were not boundaries there, but I was in the house. But as far as being home, I definitely had some boundaries set. You know, the boundaries that were there were tight and you didn't cross them. But
What if you did? Were
I
there
mean, I did.
consequences?
I was such an
Oh.
obedient child. I mean, nope. Was it? I mean, I was. I was obedient. I think I was terrified of the consequences, so I never crossed the boundary.
And see, I was the
Okay.
opposite. I was like, consequences, bring them on. Bring them on. What do you got? What do you got?
Interesting. Yeah.
Probably a very hard
There's a
feeling.
therapy
First,
session in there somewhere for both
Yeah.
of us.
yeah, I mean, I was like, you know, I think part of it because I felt so restricted and I felt like it was unfair. And, you're a teenager and everything in your life is just so urgent and important because that's where you are in life. So, yeah, when I got to a point where I felt like I was done with this, like I knew better and I didn't agree with it, kind of my red coming out, I'd be like, all right, you want to put that boundary in place? Run right over it. Now, what are you going to do?
Hmm.
My mom, yeah,
Yeah.
It's the
yeah.
Yeah.
opposite.
My mom
Yeah.
had a struggle with that. I'm sure. I'm sure we
So
can have
you said earlier that you look back now and see that that was an act of love. She was trying to protect you.
was
But
it
in the
was.
moment, it definitely does not feel that way.
I still feel like they were a little strict. Like I had to be home at 9 o'clock. All my
Wow.
friends.
Party's just starting.
Yeah, I mean it was like that, but like as I got older, I realized like, yeah, they were strict because she was trying to protect me because she loves me and she knew
Hmm.
more about what was out there in the world than I did. I'm naive and young and she did know better. Could she have given me a little bit more rope? Probably. Would I have stayed within those boundaries a little bit more?
Probably
Probably.
not.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe not. Maybe I would have just, pushed it further. She loved
Well,
me.
going
That
back to the quote
was
talking
the
about,
behind her boundary. It
yeah,
was the love.
right. And just
Right.
providing structure, and structure is essential in anything that thrives. She wanted you to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have boundaries just because they were busy and distracted, and I needed it and I didn't thrive. And Kathy, it sounds like you had boundaries and you obeyed those boundaries, and who knows where you would be had you not had them, and you had done different things. So we don't know. So fast forwarding now to then, now we know that, and now we're having our own kids. How do we, how does that affect the boundaries that we're going to put on our own children? And right now we're just talking about parenting, and we're going to move into other things as we go along. But right now, it's just like, then how did that affect our parenting when we parented our own kids? Alecia, were you like, I am so not going to be that strict? My kids are going to be able to do this, this, and this? Or hindsight going, you know what? That was because she loved me. And I love my kids and I want to keep them within these boundaries, this fence, in order for them to thrive, which I think we're going to keep hitting on that because boundaries has such a negative connotation. We're going to keep saying that it is so that the relationship can thrive in this area. So, Alecia,
So
go
it's interesting that you asked that, right? But because I felt so restricted, I was for sure like my first one, Andrew, firstborn, and I'm an only child. So there was like plenty of time and attention to focus on making sure that I followed the boundaries. But, with Andrew, I'm like, I'm not going to have that tight of boundaries on him. I'm going to loosen those up a little bit to what in my mind was reasonable. He was red just like me and like just bulldozed right over. He's like, oh, you want me to eat all my dinner? What if I just don't eat any dinner? Or what, it's like whatever I tried to kind of set boundaries around, he was just like 2 feet in the mud. Like, nope. Or,
Mm.
hey, here's the line. Don't cross it. He'd be like, oh, yeah, watch this. He would like leap over the line.
ahead.
That was my experience with Andrew. So it was kind of like I was trying to give him more space, but then he was headstrong like I was. So I think I was still parenting the same way that I was parented, though. I think if I would have differently, I would have had different results with that. I would like, I tried to make it about the relationship, but it was more about like following the rules, right? Because in my mind, that's how I was loving him. That's how I was trying to get him to be safe and live within the confines of what this world is going to require of him. But I didn't do a good job of that. I was strict with the boundaries that I had, even though I felt
Hmm.
that was right for him. I
Well,
needed a
that's parenting. We know what we know and we do the best we can at the time. He was your first one. God, we're all fresh and new. We have no idea what we're doing as parents. And the first one parenting is very different than the last one for me. Having five very different personalities, trying to be and corralling everybody. It was just so different to being just me. I'm just trying to keep everybody safe and sane and in this little corral. And so, to have boundaries around everybody hurt some more than it did others. Some was
Mm,
easier, like, yeah, sure, I can stay in here. But others are like, I can't do this. This is too restricting for me, or not enough. Maybe some needed more. And
mm-hmm.
so I think you hit that, paying attention to who they are as people, and also giving ourselves grace to grow in parenting. We have no idea what we're doing, and everybody's different. But so Kathy, talk if you have anything that came to mind as Alecia was talking about the parenting side. You're such an expert in this and parenting children within boundaries, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I am laughing because I'm thinking about all the silly boundaries that I set for my children. I mean, some of them were so ridiculous as a young mom. Again, from the sugar to no sugar. I mean, I wouldn't allow to you couldn't say but to you couldn't say no. Like, I wouldn't let anyone say no to my kids. Like, we had to redirect because of my child development background. I'm like, instead of using the word no, if you're going to watch my children or be with my children, you need to redirect them and let them know what their option is. So I'm expecting people who don't understand that to. So yeah, boundaries. I mean, I had them for sure. I wasn't as strict as I was probably similar to my parents in that I didn't have a ton. The ones I had, though, you should obey. Like, you should not use the word but
Obey. Mm-hmm.
or fart. You couldn't say fart.
Yes, same. Stupid. Couldn't say
I
stupid.
made my kids say pass gas, and yeah, you couldn't say stupid. So anyway, were those boundaries? Yeah, I think they were, and some of them were ridiculous, but some were good. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think I was extreme. Well, I was extreme, but I didn't have a ton of them, I should say. But the
Mm.
ones I had were ridiculous and expected to be followed.
Yeah, we had a girl who she'd hung out with my kids a lot. And she was like one of my own children. And she recently told me that she remembers sitting, it was Halloween, and she remembers sitting at the table and they all went trick or treating. And I made everyone eat their pea soup, gross, before they ate their Halloween candy.
Of
I'm
course you
like,
did.
girl, I am so sorry. I am so, that is not okay.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't even let my first couple. I probably wouldn't even let have the candy. I mean, I went to the store and probably bought what were those little M&M copycat things that had no sugar in them, the dots or whatever they were called. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm sure they remember. They'll be telling their therapist about their mom and her extreme boundaries.
Yeah, so some boundaries are ridiculous and just for our own sense of control. But in our mind, we think we were right at the time. So let's move on to just some more, like we've been talking about, especially last week, of the mother in law daughter in law relationship, or son in laws, or even our adult kids, and lack of boundaries and what that can do to the relationship. Because I know for me, in my situation, when I married Andy, 4 stepchildren came in, and all I wanted to do was just love on them and please them and be there for them. And I'm one human, and there were 9 other, well, now Taylor was married. So there was 10 other people who needed me. And I thought I could show up for everybody equally. I thought I could be there when they needed. I thought I could be a jump. Oh, I need you to take me here. I need to make food for everybody. And I just need to, and I didn't have boundaries. I did not. And I crashed, and the
Mm.
relationship didn't thrive because there was resentment. And so that's one thing with lack of boundaries can bring on resentment, and learning to, again, back to that theme of putting boundaries on the relationship so that it can thrive. So what does that look like in a situation like that where we've operated a certain way and then now no need to put boundaries on and it's met with resistance? Have you guys had
Listen,
that?
I think if you have a taker in the relationship too, it's even harder. Like, if you have, mother-in-law or daughter-in-law saying, "Hey, can you watch the kids?" or "Hey, can I have the kids?" And then the other person just out of because they haven't set boundaries, they feel guilty and they're like, okay, yes. But they really want to say no, but they keep saying yes. I'm a yes person who often says yes to things. And if I'm being honest, about a week later, I'm like, well, the hell did I say yes to that? So I definitely regret some of my yeses because I don't have good boundaries. I have a hard time saying no, especially if people are involved. And I can imagine a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, or, adult child relationship. If you don't have good boundaries, that could get taken advantage of. Does that make sense? That I feel like if you've
Absolutely.
got somebody saying, can you watch our dog 50 times? Or can you watch our child 50 times? Or can you pick anything? Or can I feed them ice cream? And you don't want to tell your mother-in-law no. You're like, I know we don't have ice cream, but it's one time. Well, then the next week, can they have 2 ice creams? Can they have ice cream and a cookie? Can they have
It's
ice cream and a
never
cookie and a
ending.
piece of cake? Can they have? So I could see how resentment would build up so quickly in those
Absolutely.
dynamics.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the four different types of boundaries. The physical boundary, if we want to have physical boundaries with somebody, personal space, your time, privacy, mental boundaries, protecting your beliefs, your values, your space, your intellectual space, your mind, time boundaries, like you're saying, learning to say no and prioritizing your own schedule and things that you need to get done or people you need to be present for and protecting that time boundary. So let's go back to the physical, personal space and time. This is a big one for me. I really treasure my personal space. I need quiet time. I need to be by myself sometimes. And so, in the beginning of I just didn't know that was okay to ask for that or say I'm doing that. I just felt like there was always somebody to show up for all the time, 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing and understanding if I don't get this time alone, I cannot show up for any of you. So,
Mm.
in order for me, I'm not going to have dinner with y'all tonight, or I'm not going to make dinner tonight. Can you please get Chick-fil-A on the way home? Or can somebody else step in and do that? So it's hard. It is hard to ask for that. I feel like especially us moms who we have so much expectation on us to show up all the time everywhere and do everything. So do you guys feel like for you that personal space, time, and your privacy is somewhere you have put boundaries on or you need to put boundaries on?
So me personally, I think like I don't. I do not, I very rarely feel like I need time alone to recharge. For me to recharge, I want to go do things.
Hmm.
Be around
Yellow.
people. Yeah. I mean, if I'm now, I enjoy the morning all by myself, just having some quiet time before the day starts. Yes. But as far as like when I feel drained and I feel like I've been like giving, and I just need like, I want to go to somebody's house and just kick back and
Hmm.
dinner with them, talk, share what's going on, laugh, all of that. So for me, it's a little different, but Jeff definitely needs that. I need to get alone. And I have a couple kids that are like that, where if they have a lot going on, like all the stimulation, they just need to take a step back to kind of regroup. Kathy, how are you with that?
People are shocked to know that I'm more like Kari than you. I definitely need alone time. I love to be with people, but it is draining. And if I don't get alone time, and my alone time looks like either sitting out on the dock, just staring at the water, or laying on the sofa watching a chick flick, I need to check out. So I want to check out kind of from everything. I want to do something that allows me to check out and just be. If I don't get that, I get irritable and I start getting sarcastic and I start
Hmm.
getting not so nice. So, and because we live here now at the lake in the middle of nowhere, Jeff and I don't need, like, I need even as much as I have said in every podcast, he's the most perfect man. I still need alone time from that, even not just my children, but even just truly alone time. Yeah.
So how was that for you just before you moved to the lake? Did you have people around all the time and was there a time where you had to like set a boundary and carve that out for yourself even though there were people around? You were just like, guys, I gotta step out a second. Or did you just power through?
I usually power through until I crash, to be honest, and my body will tell on me and I will get sick. And
Yeah.
so then I'll have to take a rest because I won't do it. Or I just take advantage of when it naturally happens. I mean, I'm laughing, we're recording this podcast, but Jeff took the dogs and he went to the store. And like if I weren't on the podcast recording with you, I'd be like laying on the sofa or I'd be
Yeah.
like just, somewhere relaxing. Like the minute he like scoots out, I'm like, okay, I got 30 minutes to just check out. So, I mean, I guess it's a combination. I try to make it happen, but also I think my body just makes it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Nobody's here right now at my house. And I can't even tell you the last time nobody was here. And I would do the same
You're like,
thing. I
let's
would
get off
just
this
sit
podcast.
and make myself some breakfast.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So what we want to do here is prevent, because it happens to me too, the crash, especially after Christmas time. We're
Hmm.
going. Try to get ahead of that and try to
Yeah.
recognize what we need. Alicia, all right. I need to go. I need to just go have dinner with a friend and go sit and talk and go to sit at Ted's bar and have a glass of wine and just need to, that's how you recharge. And so for you to recognize that about yourself when you need that, because guys, life does not get easier. There is
Mm.
never a point where there's no issues going on to where we are just like, okay, it's good, I'm good. That never happens. So setting boundaries in those moments, that physical boundary, can help us to be able to show up well for the people that we love better, and to recognizing what we need. Speaking to myself here. So mental boundaries, protecting our personal beliefs, our values, our intellectual space. A couple episodes ago, we talked about politics and religion. I think this kind of falls in there. That boundary is, if somebody is coming at us with disagreements, especially with religion, and we just don't want to engage in that conversation, we don't have to. We don't have to. It's okay just to set boundaries around that. Time, this is a big one. You were talking about this, Kathy, as learning to say no and prioritizing self-care. And when I am not good at that. I'm better because I crashed, and it's better, but it's a necessity. And what I'm finding is that when I do say, hey, I'm not showing up like this weekend. Andy's going to go up to Greenville. He has a business trip. Ty lives in Greenville, and we're going to help him bring some stuff home because he's moving. And I'm not going to go. Yes, I want to see Ty. Yes, I do. But also, it's a 24-hour trip. I'm going to be sitting in the car, which sitting is not good for me now that I'm 52. And so I'm setting and saying, you know what, I love you, but I'm going to put this boundary around myself, and I'm going to be home where I can go to my yoga class. I have to take Andrew to an appointment, but it's hard when there's so many good things. And I feel like that's when the trouble happens, is when it's all good things sometimes, but we still
Well,
have
and
to say no.
let me chime in on this when we're talking about our adult children relationship. It does go both ways. I think you can have a time where you've got the parent just demanding too much. They want to see the grandkids more. They want you to come over for dinner. It's that same thing of time, if they want you to be involved, but you have to live your life. Or they expect, I mean, what are you doing? You're not raising kids. You're not doing anything. Can't you watch the kids? Can't you be here for us? Can't you drive to where we are? Can't you watch our dog? Can't you, whatever? You don't even have to explain yourself on either end. It is okay just to say no. No. Well, why not? No. I mean, you don't even have to go into it. And I think the more we can say that, and I definitely am preaching to myself because I'm the worst at it, but the more we can just say, I am so sorry. You're going to have to find someone else. I am so sorry. You're going to have to find someone else. I'm not going to, I can't do it. And you don't even know an explanation. You really don't. You can
Right.
just say no.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would
Yeah,
save a lot of the resentment. I think the resentment happens sometimes because we
totally.
don't say no when we want to
Totally.
say no, and then we get angry.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's huge. As you were saying that, just the resentment sinks in when they do ask and we're like, okay, I think I should go, or whatever reason, and we don't say
Right.
no.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you have to do. It doesn't matter that you want to do yoga. It doesn't matter that you have to take him to an appointment. It just no. I mean, it doesn't even matter what the reason is.
Mm-hmm.
Just you're not going to do it. And
Yeah, and there's so many of them that I can't show up every time somebody needs me or needs something from me.
yeah.
There's so many of them. So what I'm learning is to step back, and not everybody has as many kids as we do. So not everybody deals with this, but it's is to find quality time with each one that I can show up well. All right, I can do lunch with you from 12 to 2 on this day, and I can be there all in. I'm all in. I'm engaged. But then I can't have conversations during out the week. And so learning to, for me, I guess time is to compartmentalize and work within those boundaries of that particular relationship brings freedom. And so I'm free to be in that space with this person when that time is. Alecia, anything coming to mind as
Yeah.
we're talking about this? Or go ahead.
No. Alicia, go.
Yeah, I mean, just, as a mother-in-law, I've told my daughter-in-laws that I don't ever want them to not ask, if they want us to watch the kids or they have a need there. But I know sometimes they won't because they feel like they're putting a burden on us, right? Like they think we won't say no. And
Mm,
so I have told them, like, listen, always ask. I always want you to ask. And just know that if I can't, or it's not a good time for us, or we just like, maybe we just need a break from your kids. You need a break from your kids. So don't be surprised if we need a break too, right? We'll tell you, we'll tell you no. So I'm giving you permission to ask, knowing that we can keep those boundaries, and we might say no, but we want, right? That's kind of what's coming to mind for
And
me.
for me, just with the grandkids, like until this year, I had kids still at home. So it was an easier boundary for me to set with my son and daughter-in-law. I would say, listen, ask me, but no, like if it's in the fall and Henry's playing football, the kids are going to come first before the grandkids. I mean, I'm still showing up for Henry. He's still in
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah.
He's playing basketball. I'm still going to his game before I'm going to come see you. And, that's just for me, that was the boundary I set and I stuck with that. And that also, gosh, it felt good to be able to have that. Now it's a little bit harder. I've got Henry and Sarah in college in Mississippi. I've got grandkids in Greenville, South Carolina. I've got the rest of the kids are in Atlanta. And so, like you said, Kari, with as many kids as we have, 10 kids, all the partners, all the things between just birthdays alone
Yeah.
celebrated.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
trying to show up and take them to dinner, whatever, it gets overwhelming. I think whatever it is that you set as your boundary, and for whatever reason, sticking with it, I think is the key. And it sounds like Alecia, you've done a good job of that, of
Yeah.
saying, okay, we can. And you show up for your grandkids probably more than Kari and I do combined. I mean,
And they're local
you're
too.
there in the
They're
same
right there.
right
Yeah.
there. That's what I'm saying. But so there's good and
Yeah.
things. There's good and bad with that. We have a
Yeah.
natural boundary just because of so that does
Yeah.
create some of a boundary that you have to create yourself because
Hmm.
you're in the same town.
All right, so we're going to flip it because this is a huge thing when you look on memes and social media and people complaining about their mother-in-laws is the mother-in-law who doesn't have or doesn't respect the boundaries of the new family. And you guys, I have a cat here who brought a bird in, and she's playing with the bird, and she unplugged my light and like flipping around over here. So I'm
You
trying to focus. Like there is a bird right here. So science, life,
No, don't you dare
time.
eat that out. That's real life. Right.
It's fine.
That,
I,
The role of mother-in-law, where it's us, we're here, and there's a strained relationship with the daughter-in-law. Could boundaries be part of the problem of us knowing that the daughter-in-law has set these certain boundaries? And what can that look like? What does that look like? Like, we talked about the pop-in one time. We talked about
the
not
food.
feeding the food, yeah, not feeding the kids a certain thing that they have asked for and we do it anyway. That's crossing a boundary. We don't want battery operated toys and things that make music in our home for Christmas or birthdays. And we do it anyway because it's cute and it was cheap. Just things like that. Those are subtle ways that we can cross boundaries that tear away at the relationship. Because remember, in order for it to thrive, we have to respect those boundaries. So if you are a mother-in-law and you think it's cute or funny, or you want to be the cool, fun grandma, just know that you're chiseling away at the relationship when we do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes
oh,
back to that, don't tell them. Don't tell them. We're going to let you have this, but don't tell them. We're going to let you do this, but don't tell them. Um, man,
yeah.
that's
I think
that's
one thing
openly
is,
disrespecting your daughter-in-law and your son-in-law.
yeah, and maybe, we talked about this last week about how mother-in-laws can, and myself included, can just kind of be flippant about whatever we think the boundaries are. And like, I know better, like this is going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Is doing things without asking permission.
Hmm.
We'll ask forgiveness instead.
Right, right. Or even just like, like, for example, like I have Gigi days with the grandkids, and I try, especially for their birthdays, I like to pick them up from daycare and have like a Gigi day with them. And sometimes that might include ice cream. Well, I remember the first time I kind of did that, and I picked them up and, from nap or whatever, and they had, they hadn't had their snack yet, but we weren't having dinner for a while. And I was like, I mean, they're probably going to be fine if they get ice cream, but if they eat the whole thing, they're probably not going to be okay for dinner. So I just remember like I was going to do it. And then I just texted my daughter like, hey, is it okay if I get him ice cream for a snack? Like, I know we're going to have dinner in a couple hours. It might spoil his dinner. If he has it, just let me know. She's like, yeah, that's totally fine. You can get him ice cream. my daughter-in-laws, they don't care about the dyes or anything like that. So he picked this big old Superman ice cream with like blue and yellow and red. And I'm like, have at it, kiddo.
Ooh.
Yeah.
No worries. But like if I had just taken him for ice cream and she didn't want him, or maybe she's been working on food with him, right? Like I know for a while with their first one, like you like to snack all the time, right? And then meals would come. She's like, I'm not hungry. And then she'd get up and they'd be frustrated, but then she'd be so convincing of like, I'm starving. I need a snack. It took them a minute to kind of rein that in and get her to where like, okay, well, of course, if you're eating snacks, you're not going to be hungry for dinner, So, but even just asking, I had a friend whose mother-in-law cut her daughter's hair and gave it a trim. Didn't ask. I'm pretty sure the mom would have said no. But to flip that, like I've had my grandson-in-law and, he was getting kind of shaggy and mom had kind of trimmed a little bit. And I used to cut my kids' hair all the time. I'm like, hey, like he's really like, we have him really still right now. I just gave him a bath. Would you like me to trim up these ends and even them? I can leave it if you want. And she was like, oh my gosh, no, if you can get him to sit still, will you please trim that up? And she trusted me to do that. But if like, I would never just like be like, it needs a trim. Let me just fix it.
Yeah. The fact that you asked.
Gosh, you guys.
Shows respect.
I'm sure I'm not the only one that's heard of mother-in-laws cutting their daughters. Well, anyway, ask permission. Before you do something or take them or pick them up from wherever they are, school or daycare or whatever. Anything here's a good rule of thumb that I try to live by. Not that I do this perfectly because I absolutely don't. But if it's something that I would have had a problem with someone doing without my permission, then you probably need to get permission, right? If you would have had a problem with that with your kid, then you probably need to get permission from your daughter-in-law. Yeah. She probably feels the same way.
Yeah, just err on the side of caution and respect. If you're questioning it, then ask.
Yeah, and all that's really costing you is humility and submission to what her desires are. That's it. You do it the other way, and it can cost you, again, like you're saying, chipping away the foundation of the relationship. That's, I think, the fastest way to not be able to have access to your grandkids.
Right. So say you're.
I was just thinking about too. The best way to do that is again before it gets emotional. Like just before it becomes an issue. Like even before they do potty training, say, oh my gosh, I'm so curious. Have you thought about potty training? We're going to be watching the kids. If you're potty training, maybe that's not a good example, but how do you think you're going to approach that? Or how do you want us to approach that? Or whatever the situation is, but try and do it before it gets emotional. Not that they've, I just can't even think of a good example, but any of the topics that you're talking about boundaries with, I think they can get heated. Discipline, food, all of that stuff. So I think the more we can just be casual and talk about that stuff, and you as the mother-in-law or the mom can go from the attitude of learning. Like, I just want you to teach me. You teach me how you want me to do it. I want to learn.
Yeah.
And we take off our hat of expert mom for 30 years and you teach me. They think we're stupid. That's kind of the general consensus is that mother-in-laws are stupid. Well, okay, I'll be stupid. You teach me. Because really, we don't know those children. They are their children. I mean, we might think we do as the grandparent, but we don't know. We don't know them as children. And those moms and dads know them as children. So teach us.
Right.
Tell us all the things.
So say you're in that daughter-in-law position or the daughter position, whatever. So how to communicate those boundaries in a respectful way with your mother-in-law. Like, you do want them to eat a certain way, or you don't want them to watch TV for a certain amount of hours or whatever, to use I statements. Like, this is how I would like to, not anything about the mother-in-law's doing it wrong or that she's did it wrong with her own son, her husband, but about like, I would like to do this with my kids, and I would appreciate that you respect that boundary.
I have even we too with her and their partner. Writing it down
as a family
makes and writing it down takes some of the emotion out of it, because I think sometimes when you're expressing it, you can see the mother-in-law rolling her eyes or like making a sound, or so maybe just handing her, hey, I've written down some things
That's a
that
great,
we're doing in our home, and I'm just handing that to you so you can take a look at it and let me know what you think.
great idea. I love it.
I have a really good practical example because I know sometimes with mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, like it's already kind of like you're walking on eggshells a little bit and you don't want to be like, hey, listen, this is what I want to happen. My youngest daughter-in-law, they were working on something with Law, our grandson. And she said, hey, listen, can I talk to you about something because we'd really like your help with this? And so, and it was like, hey, here's what we would like to have. It was a discipline thing. You know, when he does this, here's how we'd like you to respond. This is what we're doing at home. When you watch, if you could reinforce that, because we really would like your help to work on this with him. That was like, to me,
Great.
I was like, yes, I'll help you. Yes, of course. Like, let's be a village. Absolutely. Like, I will, whatever you want. You know, but that was like, for me, that was just such a wonderful way to phrase it and put it out there. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you all would respond to something like that. But for me, that was like spot on. I was like, I would
Yeah.
help, right?
I'm just thinking though, at what point, like I was trying to think, what would I do if my daughter-in-law said, "Hey, we're potty training and we give him an M&M every time he goes to the potty, or we give him a sticker." I'm so opposed to that. If y'all don't know that about me from a child development perspective, so I'm like, oh, so I don't know when they ask you to do something that you're like, I don't know. I haven't run up to that. I haven't run against that yet. Really, I've not had them ask me to give them a sticker or something, but I don't know. I might have to think about that.
It might
Alicia, I'm
be
sure I would
prepare
fit in.
yourself because it might be coming.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's
Another,
going to be interesting, though. The boundaries might be easier if you agree with it. What do you do if you disagree? If you truly do disagree with it, that might be a little bit more sticky.
Well, it might. But I think at that point, when she's asking for help, that opens the conversation to say,
True.
wow,
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
can we talk about this? Because, you know, XYZ, have you considered maybe these options for that? And
Hmm.
there's some things that, you know, research back up or whatever. I think that opens, I think that opens it for conversation, right? But at the end of the day, if that's what she wants, you
Oh,
have,
I was going to say, I do have one daughter-in-law who's like, you give all the research, and they're like, we have decided. And I'm like, okay,
when you're the role, right? You don't
Yeah.
get to make those
yep,
decisions, unfortunately.
we have
Right.
decided. Yep.
Yeah. Or
Yep. Yep.
Carly is like, tell me, mom, I don't know. I've never done this before. You did it. Like, tell
Hmm.
me when I'm
Hmm.
not doing something or give, like you said, Alicia, here's some more ideas where they're like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have thought about that. Like, best case scenario, right? Is, oh, yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for those other ideas. I wouldn't have told you that. Let's go back. We're
Ones
wrapping
are
up
the
here. Oh,
problem,
go ahead.
though. Those sticky ones are, that's where the rub comes. It's not the ones where they go, oh, that's so
Right.
great. Thank you
True.
for
Yeah,
sharing.
right, right.
It's when they go, no.
Yeah.
So that's where we have to decide, how do we respond if we don't agree? And I think that maybe is a topic for another day, but just you have to respect. I think at the end of the day, just what you said,
Right.
though,
Yeah.
you still have to respect their boundary with their children.
And put
You
down
just
what
do.
we think is that, hill to die on is no, it's their family, their kids. They're going to do it
I
the way they want to do it.
As grandparents, if it's something that we feel very strongly about, like, let's say, for example, you know, and instead of like the redirecting, like she was talking about, and not allowing him to sass and all that, she
Hmm.
said, he does that. I need you to take this ping pong paddle and spank him 5 times hard. And I was like, right, this didn't happen. This is all
Right. Yeah. You're
whatever that
fabricating.
word is where you make stuff up, you know. And I was like, I mean, I don't think I could do that. I think us as grandparents, then having that conversation, if she is like do or die on this, then it's okay for me to set boundaries and say,
Mm,
I really feel comfortable with that. If you want us to watch him, like we need to come up with a different form of discipline for him, right? It's okay for me to say, I can't watch him
That's
enough
right.
for you.
yeah,
And let no, not
Yeah.
just be
yeah,
like, fine, like have that conversation and set the boundaries for yourself. And that is okay. It's not, but again, what's your motive? You should be doing that from like, listen, I love you and want to respect you and I love him, but I also know I can't uphold that boundary. It's not okay with me. Not like, well, if you want me to do that, then I'm not going to watch
Right.
it. Right. That's like
Yeah,
two.
Yeah.
that's so good. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
said that's exactly right. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, and
Oh,
the thing
Don't
about boundaries is to be consistent. So be careful when you say, okay, when he does this, you're going to spank him 5 times, because you need to be consistent with that every time. So if it's not really a boundary, then if you're not consistent with it, then it's not a boundary. So consistency is huge when you're saying, I want you to do this with my child. Okay, really? Are you really saying that? Because that's what's going to happen.
right.
And being consistent with that, because it's really important we stick with that and respecting each other's boundaries. We're going to wrap it up here. 45 minutes. Respecting and prepare for resistance. People who don't have boundaries in their life or not used to it are going to buck up against it, and there's going to be resistance. But if we keep being consistent, we're protecting ourselves, and it's to protect the relationship. It is to keep the
Yeah.
relationship. That's the reason why we set boundaries. It's for ourselves and for others, and to let those relationships thrive within those boundaries. It's not a negative. It can be a negative thing, but like you keep saying, Alecia, it's good. What is the heart issue? What's the reason why we're doing it? It's to protect the relationship. And sometimes the relationship won't make it. If it's toxic and there's not respect there, and there's control. And I feel like, Kathy, you were talking about just social media and all the stuff on there about mother-in-laws. Like, that's part of the problem, is that we as mother-in-laws don't respect those boundaries, and it turns toxic, and that's on us. So we can do better.
and
All
again, if
right.
you're repeatedly not respecting the boundaries, that's toxic, right? If you're intentionally disrespecting boundaries, you are a toxic mother-in-law. If you're missing the boundaries and it's not your intent, that's not your mother-in-law being toxic. That's life happening and something went sideways.
Mm,
Right.
Intention every single time, that's when you can say, yes, that's toxic, not healthy.
hmm Right. As long as the daughter-in-law or that family has communicated clearly what those boundaries are. So sometimes there can be inference there of like, oh, she should just know. She should just like, no, not all, not always. So clear
Yeah.
communication, boundaries are for the relationship, and to be in a humble place of always still learning. Any final thoughts?
Always still learning. Nope. Good one. Tough one. That's a tough one.
I have a,
Alecia, do you have a deposit?
I do. And last week we talked just briefly on like what is toxic, like I'm cutting out toxicity in my life and what is setting a boundary. And I think you can set a boundary against that toxic mother-in-law, but I think the difference of just cutting them off and setting the boundary is the boundary almost requires you to have a conversation about that. Let them know why you're setting the boundary.
Mm,
Cut things off and not talk to them and whatever. That's not healthy either, right? And that's not helping them to understand the boundaries, right? Like, you can't be on this side of the boundary because this is what continues to happen. We would love for you to be on this side of the boundary,
yeah,
but we can't let you in
right.
unless you are willing to comply with what our wishes are. Anyway, that's my thought. Don't just cut it out. I mean, let
hmm
them know what the problem is so they
hmm
can.
So what's your small deposit?
You know what? I think I'm just going to evaluate my own boundaries for me and with the relationships in my home and see if they need to be adjusted and how I feel about them and how have I set them and am I sticking to them? And then being open to the boundaries that are set for us.
That is perfect. Focus on ourselves first, be some self-aware
Yeah.
and do self-care. Yep, love it.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta
All
give you
right.
an mother-in-laws who are out there, ask your daughters-in-law or sons if there are any boundaries that you are crossing, that you would like them, that they are maybe
Right.
not saying anything because they're afraid it's going to mess up the relationship, which is actually messing up the relationship by not saying anything. But that's a whole nother. Ask them, like, hey, is there
Yeah.
anything that I'm doing or that I have done that has crossed boundaries that you're wanting
Good.
from me? How
Really
can I
good.
fix that?
Yep. All right.
Yep. That's good.
Good one, you guys. So we'll be back next week.
Okay.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.